Good evening to everyone from Spain. So first of all, I want to thank Gary Jacobs for organizing this marvelous webinar. As you were saying, we have at least 5 or even more days of deep thinking after listening to Professor Byers. So thank you very much. Also, thank you very much for Professor Byers for all the questions that you have raised. And I am really impressed because I teach epistemology, and I must confess that I rarely find this depth and these inspiring ideas in philosophers. So you are a mathematician, and maybe we philosophers should listen more to mathematicians. Thank you very much. I have some questions. I will try to be brief, as we don't have much time. The first one is probably related with the nature of mind and the nature of consciousness. I know that this is a very difficult question, and you said that mind cannot be reified, cannot be objectified. At some point, you say in one of the pieces of paper that Gary Jacobs sent to us that mind does not emerge from the activity of the brain. My question is, the activity, mind as an activity, must be rooted in something. So do you think the neurobiological basis of mind, the neural correlates of mind, and this will open the way for unveiling the neurobiological roots of creativity? And also, would you endorse emergentism as a philosophy of mind in your conception of what mind is? So this would be the first question regarding the nature of mind and consciousness. Also, I have a question about deep thinking, because, I mean, of course, you have insisted upon deep thinking as something sudden, something, so to speak, contingent, that, I mean, we cannot grasp it and we cannot expect to draw a law of when a great idea will come. But nonetheless, when we read the biography of great minds, for instance, Sir Isaac Newton, there is a relation between the quantity of time invested in thinking about something and the possibility of having a great idea. Newton's patience was legendary. So deep thinking is actually some sort of transition from quantity into quality, like a critical point. When we have a certain temperature, we turn from a gas into a liquid and then into a solid. But of course, there is a microscopical continuity. It is not absolute discontinuity. We can find the microscopical connection between the past and the future, the pre-creative moment and the creative moment. So that's also a question I would like to pose. Also, I find really fascinating what you have said about the paradoxical nature of deep thinking. I was thinking of Einstein. You have mentioned Einstein. So when Einstein writes his famous 1905 paper, The Basis of the Special Theory of Relativity, he tried to reconcile Newton's mechanics and Maxwell's electromagnetism. So we have this marvelous example of someone, a genius, who manages to reconcile two opposing views. My question is the following. Do you think that this famous concept in philosophy, in Hegel's philosophy, Aufhebung, like a synthesis, thesis against antithesis, Aufhebung, without suppressing both the thesis and the antithesis, do you think it is the best way to describe this creative moment? And also going back to Einstein, of course, he's a genius. He created the special theory of relativity, but if we look at the historical context, in a sense, there was an intrinsic necessity that something as the special theory of relativity would come out. Poincaré was working on it, Lorentz, of course. So there was a zeitgeist there that prepared physics for a special relativity. So in which sense is it so creative? Isn't it also the logical continuation of the previous work? Of course, I do not want to seem deterministic. I think that history is also based upon great minds. But when we look at history, we also find these profound continuities. The French Revolution was revolutionary, as the name says, but it could be expected from the social, political, and scientific developments of the 18th century. So regarding the incommensurability of conceptual systems, and you take this idea from Thomas Kuhn, but again, I believe that if we look at those events microscopically, we can say natura non facit saltum or historia non facit saltum. So it is a matter of perspectives, but if we look at it, there is a logical necessity in how science is developed. So this is also a paradox, because on the one hand, we need creative geniuses who foster history and foster science, but on the other hand, we can see a necessity, a clear logical picture of how science evolves. And finally, just to finish, a question regarding what you said about the objective and subjective dimensions of a conceptual system. So, first of all, I think that we should draw a distinction between objectivity and completeness. We can have a perfectly objective approach to reality and even to mind without it being complete. By completeness, I understand a case in which for every element of reality, we can find an element in the theory. But this one-to-one map is, of course, impossible. We could never replicate every personal and subjective experience. Nonetheless, that does not mean that we could have an objective description of how mind works, even if we cannot cover all the particular instances in which mind appears. So, I mean, I know that some of the questions were too abstract, but in any case, please, because my time is over, please let me congratulate you on your wonderful presentation and on all the pieces of information that we have received. And I think that we are all extremely inspired by your work. And again, thanks a lot to Gary Jacobs for organizing this wonderful presentation. I hope that in Dubrovnik we'll have the chance to discuss all these ideas.